Number 8. Amy Winehouse. Have you ever wondered what happens when talent burns too bright? Can fame consume a soul? Amy Winehouse's haunting vocals and signature beehive hairdo made her instantly recognizable, but behind the glamour lurked a troubled spirit fighting inner demons. On July 23, 2011, the world lost one of its most distinctive voices when Amy was found dead in her London apartment. The official cause: alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol content was 5 times the legal driving limit, a shocking end for the jazz-infused soul singer who had captivated audiences worldwide. Born in North London to a Jewish family, Amy showed musical promise from an early age. Her grandmother had once dated jazz legend Ronnie Scott, and Amy grew up absorbing jazz standards and developing her unique vocal style. When her debut album Frank arrived in 2003, critics immediately recognized a rare authenticity in her music. But it was 2006's Back to Black that catapulted her to international stardom. The album, inspired by her turbulent relationship with Blake Fielder Civil, showcased Amy's exceptional talent for turning personal pain into universal art. Her hit Rehab became ironically prophetic as her struggle with substances intensified in the public eye. The paparazzi documented Amy's downward spiral relentlessly. Images of her looking disheveled, confused, and increasingly thin-plastered tabloids worldwide. Despite multiple attempts at rehabilitation, Amy couldn't escape the grip of addiction. Her final performance in Belgrade, Serbia, just a month before her death, showed a performer barely able to stand or remember lyrics. In the wake of her passing, her parents established the Amy Winehouse Foundation to prevent drug and alcohol misuse among young people. Her posthumous compilation, Lioness: Hidden Treasures, gave fans a final glimpse of her extraordinary talent. Amy's legacy lives on not just in her music, but as a cautionary tale about the pressures of fame and the devastation of addiction. Her voice, powerful, vulnerable, and utterly distinctive, continues to influence artists across genres, a reminder of what was lost when she joined the 27 Club. Number 7. Kurt Cobain. Did a generation lose its voice in a Seattle greenhouse? Was Kurt Cobain's death the end of an era? On April 5, 1994, the frontman of Nirvana died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, leaving behind a suicide note that quoted Neil Young, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." Kurt's story begins in Aberdeen, Washington, a logging town hit hard by economic depression. His parents divorced when he was 9, an event that profoundly affected him. Young Kurt bounced between relatives' homes, eventually dropping out of high school just weeks before graduation. Music became his refuge and outlet. Nirvana formed in 1987, but it wasn't until 1991's Nevermind that everything changed. The album's lead single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, became an anthem for Generation the 10th, and Kurt reluctantly became the voice of disaffected youth everywhere. Overnight, the underground sound of Seattle grunge hit the mainstream, with Kurt as its poster boy. Fame sat uncomfortably on Kurt's shoulders. He struggled with chronic stomach pain that doctors couldn't diagnose, leading to self-medication with heroin. His relationship with Courtney Love, herself a musician with the band Hole, generated constant media attention. When their daughter Frances Bean was born in 1992, Kurt tried repeatedly to get clean for her sake. In the months leading to his death, warning signs appeared. In March 1994, Kurt overdosed on champagne and Rohypnol in Rome, possibly a suicide attempt. Later that month, Love organized an intervention, and Kurt agreed to enter a rehabilitation facility in Los Angeles. But he left after only a few days, returned to Seattle, and disappeared. On April 8th, an electrician found Kurt's body at his Lake Washington home. The medical examiner determined he had died 3 days earlier. The police found a suicide note addressed to Kurt's childhood imaginary friend Bada, expressing his guilt about not enjoying performing anymore and his fear of letting fans down. Kurt's death devastated fans worldwide and permanently altered the musical landscape. Nirvana's unplugged performance, aired repeatedly on MTV after his death, took on an almost spiritual quality. His journals, published in 2002, revealed a sensitive, thoughtful artist at odds with his public image. Kurt's influence extends far beyond the 3 studio albums Nirvana produced, inspiring countless musicians who continue to cite him as a primary influence. The question remains, what might Kurt have created had he survived his demons? Number 6. Jim Morrison. What happens when poetry meets rock and roll? Can a self-proclaimed Lizard King conquer his own darkness? Jim Morrison, the magnetic frontman of The Doors, died on July 3, 1971, in a bathtub in Paris. No autopsy was performed, leaving the exact cause of his death a mystery that fans still debate today. Born to a Navy admiral, Jim spent his childhood moving between military bases. He developed an early interest in literature, particularly the works of philosophers like Nietzsche and poets like Arthur Rimbaud. By the time he enrolled at UCLA to study film, Jim had developed both his poetic voice and a rebellious streak that would define his short life. The Doors formed in 1965 after a chance meeting between Jim and keyboardist Ray Manzarek on Venice Beach. With guitarist Robbie Krieger and drummer John Densmore, they created a sound unlike anything else in rock music: dark, theatrical, and hypnotic. Their self-titled debut album in 1967 included Light My Fire, which shot to number 1 despite its unconventional 7-minute length. On stage, Jim transformed. Shy and introspective in private, he became a shamanistic figure under the spotlight, often pushing boundaries of acceptable performance. His arrests for indecency and inciting riots became as notable as his music. The most infamous incident occurred in Miami in 1969, when Jim allegedly exposed himself on stage. Though later evidence suggested this might not have happened as reported, the charge followed him. By 1971, Jim had grown disillusioned with his rock star persona. After recording LA Woman with The Doors, he left for Paris with his longtime girlfriend Pamela Courson to focus on his poetry. Jim had gained weight and grown a beard, making him nearly unrecognizable to fans. Friends reported he seemed happier than he had been in years. The circumstances of Jim's death remain clouded. According to the official account, Pamela found him dead in the bathtub of their apartment. She stated that Jim had been feeling ill and taking a bath. No autopsy was performed, and the death certificate listed heart failure as the cause. Jim was buried in Paris's Père Lachaise cemetery, where his grave remains one of the most visited in the world. Rumors persisted for decades. Some claimed Jim faked his death to escape fame. Others suggested a heroin overdose that Pamela covered up. Whatever the truth, Jim's legacy as a poet, performer, and cultural icon endures. His deep voice still intones "This is the End" on radios worldwide, his philosophical lyrics continuing to resonate with new generations discovering The Doors' music. Number 5. Janis Joplin. Have you ever heard a voice that seemed to contain an entire lifetime of pain and joy? Could anyone sing the blues like Janis? On October 4, 1970, Janis Joplin was found dead in her room at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood. The cause: a heroin overdose. She had been recording what would become her final album, Pearl. Janis grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, where her difference from the conservative community around her caused constant friction. She found solace in the music of blues singers like Bessie Smith and Big Mama Thornton, whose raw emotional power spoke to something deep within her. After a brief, unhappy stint at the University of Texas, where fellow students voted her ugliest man on campus, Janis fled to San Francisco's burgeoning counterculture scene. In 1966, Janis joined Big Brother and the Holding Company. Their performance at the 1967 Monterey Pop Festival marked Janis's breakthrough. Her passionate rendition of Ball and Chain left the audience stunned. Documentary footage shows a mesmerized Mama Cass Elliot mouthing "wow" as Janis poured her heart out on stage. Janis's raw, raspy vocals and uninhibited performance style quickly made her the premier female rock star of her generation. After leaving Big Brother, she formed her own backing groups, first the Cosmic Blues Band and then the Full Tilt Boogie Band. Her cover of Chris Christopherson's Me and Bobby McGee became her only #1 hit, released posthumously. Behind the fearless stage presence lurked profound insecurities and a desperate need for acceptance. Janis once said, "On stage, I make love to 25,000 people, then I go home alone." She struggled with alcohol and heroin throughout her adult life, though by 1970 seemed to be finding some stability. She had recently attended her high school reunion, bought a home in Larkspur, California, and was engaged to Seth Morgan. On the evening of October 4th, Janis visited the recording studio to listen to instrumental tracks for Pearl. Later at her hotel, she purchased heroin. When she failed to appear the next day, road manager John Cook went to check on her and found her dead on the floor beside her bed. A bruise on her face suggested she had hit the table as she fell. The music world mourned the loss of yet another brilliant talent. Janis had been working on Buried Alive in the Blues, but never recorded the vocals. The instrumental track appears on Pearl as a poignant reminder of what might have been. Her unique blend of rock, blues, and soul influenced countless artists who followed, from Stevie Nicks to Florence Welch. In death, Janis finally achieved the lasting love she had always sought in life, from generations of fans who continue to discover her powerful, heart-wrenching music. #4. Brian Jones. Was he the forgotten founder of the world's greatest rock band? Did Brian Jones's creativity get overshadowed by his tragedy? On July 3, 1969, Brian was found motionless at the bottom of his swimming pool at Cochford Farm in East Sussex, England. The coroner's report cited death by misadventure, with alcohol and drugs in his system compromising his ability to swim. Brian grew up in Cheltenham, a genteel spa town where his parents were respected members of the community. A rebellious streak emerged early. He fathered 2 children out of wedlock by age 17. But it was his musical talent that defined him, learning guitar, harmonica, and various exotic instruments with remarkable ease. In 1962, Brian placed an advertisement in Jazz News seeking musicians for a rhythm and blues group. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards responded, and the Rolling Stones were born. Brian named the band after a Muddy Waters song, embodying his deep reverence for American blues. In the early days, Brian was unquestionably the band's leader and most accomplished musician. The Stones' first manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, recognized the commercial potential in the Jagger-Richards songwriting partnership and gradually pushed Brian to the sidelines. As Mick and Keith grew in confidence and prominence, Brian's role diminished. Still, his musical contributions remained vital. His slide guitar on No Expectations, sitar on Paint It Black, and marimba on Under My Thumb gave these songs their distinctive character. Brian's personal life spiraled increasingly out of control. Multiple drug arrests damaged his ability to tour with the band, particularly in the United States. His relationship with girlfriend Anita Pallenberg ended when she left him for Keith Richards during a trip to Morocco in 1967. His substance abuse worsened, making him increasingly unreliable. In June 1969, Mick, Keith, and Charlie Watts visited Brian at his country estate to inform him he was out of the band he had founded. The official announcement stated Brian had left voluntarily to pursue his own musical direction. Less than a month later, he was dead. Frank Thorogood, a contractor working on Brian's estate, was with him that night. Decades later, allegations surfaced that Thorogood may have been involved in Brian's death, but no charges were ever filed. 2 days after Brian's death, the Rolling Stones performed a free concert in London's Hyde Park, intended as an introduction to new guitarist Mick Taylor. Instead, it became a memorial for Brian. Mick Jagger read a section of Shelley's Adonais before releasing Thousands of White Butterflies. Brian's legacy lives in the band's early blues-based sound and in his pioneering incorporation of world music elements into rock. His grave in Cheltenham bears the epitaph, "His message of love will continue to vibrate," a fitting tribute to a musician who heard possibilities others couldn't yet imagine. #3. Jimi Hendrix. Can anyone make a guitar speak like he did? Has any musician changed their instrument so completely? On September 18, 1970, Jimi Hendrix was found unresponsive in a London apartment. He had asphyxiated on his own vomit after taking barbiturates. The world lost not just a guitarist but a visionary who had revolutionized what was possible with 6 strings and an amplifier. Born Johnny Allen Hendrix in Seattle, Jimi's early life was marked by instability. His parents' troubled relationship, poverty, and frequent moves created a difficult childhood. Young Jimi carried a broom with him, pretending it was a guitar until his father eventually bought him a used acoustic for $5. By his teens, he was playing in local bands, his natural talent already apparent. After a brief stint in the Army where he served as a paratrooper before being discharged, Jimi paid his dues as a backing musician for acts like the Isley Brothers, Little Richard, and Curtis Knight. Playing behind these stars taught him stagecraft and showmanship, but restricted his emerging experimental style. It wasn't until he moved to London in 1966 at the suggestion of Chas Chandler of The Animals that Jimi truly found his voice. The Jimi Hendrix Experience, with Noel Redding on bass and Mitch Mitchell on drums, exploded onto the British music scene. Their debut single, Hey Joe, reached the UK top 10. When Jimi famously set his guitar on fire at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, he became an overnight sensation in America as well. Albums like Are You Experienced and Electric Ladyland showcased not just his revolutionary guitar playing but his skills as a songwriter and producer. Jimi's technical innovations transformed guitar playing forever. His use of feedback, wah-wah, distortion, and stereophonic phasing effects created sounds no one had heard before. His rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock, with its sonic representation of bombs bursting in air, became a defining moment of both the festival and the anti-Vietnam War movement. By 1970, Jimi was increasingly uncomfortable with his wild image. He disbanded the Experience and formed Band of Gypsies with his old Army buddy Billy Cox and drummer Buddy Miles, moving toward a fusion of rock, funk, and jazz. He was also building his own studio, Electric Lady, where he hoped to experiment further. The circumstances surrounding his death remain somewhat murky. Jimi had been staying with girlfriend Monica Danneman in her London apartment. According to her account, he took 9 of her prescribed sleeping pills, far more than the recommended dose. When she couldn't wake him in the morning, she called an ambulance, but it was too late. Jimi's musical legacy is immeasurable. He ranks consistently as the greatest guitarist in rock history, and his influence extends across all genres of music. Decades after his death, musicians still study his techniques, producers still marvel at his innovative studio approaches, and fans still wonder what magical sounds might have emerged had he lived beyond age 27. Number 2. Robert Johnson. Did he really sell his soul to the devil? How did a mysterious blues player from Mississippi become one of the most influential musicians in history? Robert Johnson died on August 16, 1938, near Greenwood, Mississippi. The most widely accepted account suggests he was poisoned by the jealous husband of a woman he had been flirting with at a country dance. Robert's early life remains largely speculative. Born in Hazlehurst, Mississippi around 1911, he grew up in a South deeply segregated by Jim Crow laws. Like many Black Americans of his generation, Robert received little formal education and began working in the fields at a young age. His stepfather taught him the basics of the harmonica, but it was the guitar that captured Robert's imagination. The most enduring legend about Johnson concerns his extraordinary guitar skills. According to the story, Johnson took his guitar to a crossroads near Dockery Plantation at midnight. There, the devil tuned his guitar in exchange for his soul. When Johnson returned to juke joints where he had previously played, his improvement was so dramatic that supernatural intervention seemed the only explanation. In reality, Johnson likely studied under Ike Zinnerman and Son House, established blues musicians who helped shape his distinctive style. Son House later recalled Johnson as an adequate harmonica player who couldn't play guitar at all until he disappeared for several months, returning with astounding abilities that mystified everyone. Johnson recorded only 29 songs across 2 sessions, one in San Antonio in 1936 and another in Dallas in 1937. These recordings showcase his complex guitar technique, haunting vocal style, and lyrics that blended the sacred and profane. Songs like Crossroad Blues, Hellhound on My Trail, and Love in Vain display a sophistication that transcended the typical Delta blues of the era. The circumstances of his death contain as many mysteries as his life. The most credible account suggests that while playing at a juke joint near Greenwood, Johnson flirted with the wife of the establishment's owner. The jealous man allegedly gave Johnson a bottle of whiskey laced with strychnine. Johnson became ill and died 3 days later, reportedly on his hands and knees, howling like a dog, an eerie echo of his lyrics about hellhounds. For decades, Johnson remained an obscure figure known only to blues enthusiasts. His wider recognition began in 1961 when Columbia Records released King of the Delta Blues Singers, a compilation that introduced his music to a new generation. Musicians like Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Robert Plant discovered Johnson's recordings and cited him as a profound influence, bringing his music to mainstream attention. The exact location of Johnson's grave remains uncertain, with at least 3 different sites claiming to be his final resting place. This ambiguity seems fitting for a man whose life was shrouded in mystery and whose brief career created ripples that eventually transformed American music. Without Robert Johnson's innovations, rock and roll as we know it might never have existed. Number 1. Jean-Michel Basquiat. Can art burn too bright to last? What happens when street art meets high society? On August 12, 1988, Jean-Michel Basquiat was found dead in his Great Jones Street loft in Manhattan. The cause: a heroin overdose. The art world lost one of its most vibrant voices, a painter who had risen from tagging subway walls to international acclaim in less than a decade. Though primarily known as a visual artist rather than a musician, Basquiat had deep connections to the music scene. He performed in the noise band Grey, produced the single Beat Bop by Rammellzee and K-Rob, now considered a hip-hop classic, and collaborated with numerous musicians. His artwork consistently referenced jazz greats like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, while his friendship with Madonna briefly blossomed into romance. Born to Haitian and Puerto Rican parents in Brooklyn, Jean-Michel showed artistic talent from childhood. His mother encouraged his creativity and took him regularly to Manhattan museums. At 17, he left home and supported himself by selling hand-painted postcards and T-shirts while developing his graffiti persona Same Old Shit, whose cryptic messages appeared throughout Lower Manhattan. Basquiat's transition from street artist to gallery darling happened with breathtaking speed. His participation in the Times Square show in 1980 caught the attention of the art establishment. By 1982, at just 21, he was showing in major galleries internationally. His raw neo-expressionist style, combining text, anatomical drawings, African-inspired imagery, and bold colors, electrified the art world. His friendship and collaboration with Andy Warhol provided both mentorship and validation. The two artists produced numerous works together between 1984 and 1986, though their joint exhibition received harsh criticism that reportedly strained their relationship. When Warhol died unexpectedly in 1987, Basquiat became increasingly isolated and his heroin use intensified. Basquiat's work engaged directly with issues of race, inequality, and cultural heritage. His paintings often featured crowns and halos around Black historical figures, elevating them to saints or kings. He incorporated references to the African diaspora, Caribbean culture, and the harsh realities of racism in America. His 1982 painting, Untitled Skull, exemplifies his ability to transform pain into powerful art. Success came with complications. As one of few Black artists in the predominantly white art establishment, Basquiat faced both subtle and overt racism. Critics sometimes focused more on his race, appearance, and personality than his artistic achievements. The pressure of being labeled the Black Picasso weighed heavily on him as his fame grew. In the months before his death, Basquiat had been trying to get clean, even traveling to Hawaii in an attempt to kick his heroin habit. Upon his return to New York, however, he relapsed. His death at 27 cut short a revolutionary artistic career that had already produced over 1,000 paintings and 2,000 drawings. Today, Basquiat's works sell for tens of millions of dollars, with his painting, Untitled, fetching $110,500,000 in 2017, at the time, the highest sum ever paid at auction for an American artist. His influence extends beyond fine art into fashion, music, and street culture. The boy who spray-painted Manhattan walls now hangs in the world's most prestigious museums, his visual language continuing to speak to new generations about power, identity, and the human condition. Isn't it ironic that the establishment that once ignored his Samo, tags now pays millions for his canvases?